The envelope hit the white linen tablecloth so softly that only Daniel heard it. Everyone else was laughing, clinking glasses, pretending this family was something it had never been. She didn't say a word, just slid it toward him with 2 fingers and went back to smiling at her future mother-in-law like she hadn't just dropped a grenade into the centerpiece. Daniel stared at the envelope. His name was written on it in handwriting he didn't recognize, precise, legal, the kind of lettering that meant someone had taken their time. He turned it over, a notary seal pressed into the back. His chest went cold. Across the table, his son Marcus was mid-toast, holding a glass of Prosecco too high, already a little pink from the open bar. His fiancée, Brianna, sat beside him, poised and still smiling, and Daniel thought, she rehearsed this moment. She knew exactly when to do it. He tucked the envelope beneath his napkin and smiled back at her. He didn't open it until he was in the restaurant bathroom, standing under a flickering fluorescent light with his reading glasses crooked on his nose. It was a deed. To the house. His house. The house on Calloway Street where he had raised Marcus alone after Sandra left. The house where he'd patched the same roof 3 times because he couldn't afford to replace it outright. The house where Marcus had learned to ride a bike in the driveway, where Daniel had sat up until 4 in the morning helping him study for the bar exam, where every photograph of their life together still hung in the hallway in frames. Daniel had put up himself with a level and a pencil mark. The deed had been transferred, 6 weeks ago, into Brianna's name. Daniel was 61 years old, and he was not a man who cried easily. He'd learned that from his own father, who'd learned it from his, a long, unbroken chain of men who absorbed their pain quietly and called it strength. He stood in that bathroom for 3 full minutes, breathing through his nose, reading the document twice to make sure he wasn't misunderstanding. He wasn't. The signature at the bottom was Marcus's. His son's signature, on a document that gave away the house Daniel had owned for 22 years. A house he deeded over to Marcus 4 years ago as a gift, as protection, as a father trying to make sure his son had something solid beneath him if the world ever shifted. He'd trusted Marcus with it because he still lived there, because Marcus was his son, because some things you do for love and don't think twice about. He folded the document carefully, slid it into the inner pocket of his blazer close to his chest, washed his hands, looked at himself in the mirror for a moment, at the gray at his temples, at the lines around his eyes, at the face of a man who had given quietly and completely his entire life. And then he straightened his tie and walked back to the rehearsal dinner. Brianna caught his eye the moment he sat down. She was watching him with something that wasn't quite a smile and wasn't quite a threat. It was an assessment. She was measuring how he'd taken it, calibrating her next move. Daniel recognized it because he'd spent 30 years as a contracts attorney before he retired, and he knew what a negotiation looked like even when it was dressed up in a rehearsal dinner and ivory table runners. She'd done this on purpose, tonight, in front of family, because she understood correctly that he wouldn't make a scene, that he'd been raised to absorb things quietly and call it dignity. He picked up his fork and ate his salad. The dinner went on for 2 more hours. Marcus gave a speech about how grateful he was, how much he loved Brianna, how he felt like the luckiest man alive. Daniel applauded. Daniel hugged his son at the end of the night. Daniel said the right things to the right people and drove home in the dark. He sat in the driveway of the house on Calloway Street for a long time. The porch light was on, motion activated, the bulb he'd replaced last October. The rows of Sharon bush by the front steps needed trimming. He'd been meaning to get to it. He went inside and sat at the kitchen table and thought for a very long time. He called his former colleague Yvette the next morning. Yvette was a real estate and estate attorney who owed him 2 favors and had never in 30 years told him what he wanted to hear when what he needed was the truth. "Need you to look at something," he said. She called him back in 40 minutes. "Daniel." A pause. This transfer was filed legally. Marcus signed, notarized, recorded with the county. "I know, you understanding me? The house is hers. I understand. You want to tell me what you want to do about it." He looked out the kitchen window at the backyard. The oak tree he'd planted the year Marcus was born was enormous now, taller than the roofline. He'd watered it from a bucket when it was a sapling. "I want to know my options," he said. Yvette told him. It wasn't good. The transfer had been completed correctly, and because Daniel himself had transferred the property to Marcus freely, without restriction, Marcus had had the full legal right to do whatever he wanted with it, including give it away, including give it to a woman he'd known for 18 months. There's one angle, Yvette said. If you could demonstrate that Marcus was under undue influence, if there's evidence this wasn't his decision freely made, I'm not going to do that to my son. A long silence. No, Yvette said. I didn't think you would. He didn't call Marcus. Not that day. He spent the day in the house, moving through each room slowly, the way you move through a place when you're memorizing it. He ran his hand along the banister Marcus had slid down as a kid until it was polished smooth. He stood in the doorway of Marcus's old room, the one that was a home office now, and looked at the patch of wall where the growth chart pencil marks still lived under 2 coats of paint. He could still see them faintly, the way old things stay visible under new surfaces. Marcus called him on the 3rd day. Dad, I need to talk to you. I figured. A pause. You saw the envelope. I did. Dad, it's not what you think. It was about the mortgage, the refinancing. Brianna's credit is better than mine, so it made more sense to put it in her name. And Marcus. Silence. You understand what you did. His son was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller. It's still your home, Dad. That doesn't change. Nothing changes. Everything changes, Daniel said. The moment a piece of paper says something different, everything changes. I taught you that, you know that. Brianna wouldn't. I'm not talking about Brianna, Daniel said quietly. I'm talking about you. I put that house in your name because I trusted you with it, because I believed that trust didn't need to be written into a contract between us. That's what I'm talking about. Line was very quiet. Dad, I'm sorry. I should have told you. I should have asked. Can you forgive me? Daniel looked out the window at the oak tree. He thought about the bucket of water. He thought about 22 years of roof repairs and bike riding and bar exam nights and the growth chart under the paint. He thought about what it meant to love someone without a contract, what it cost, what it was worth. I'm going to tell you something, Daniel said. And I need you to hear me, not Brianna, not your pride, just you. I'm listening. Not leaving this house. Not because of a deed, not because of a signature. I live here. I built a life here. And if it comes to it legally, formally, in writing, I will protect that. Do you understand me? Another silence, longer this time. Yes, Marcus said. I understand. Then here's what's going to happen. You're going to have a conversation with your fiancée about what she did at that dinner and why. And then you're going to come over here alone and we're going to sit at this kitchen table and talk about how this family operates, whether you're married or not. I'm not finished. I love you. You are my son. That doesn't have an expiration date and it doesn't have a deed attached to it. But love doesn't mean silent. It never meant that. I should have taught you that better. That's on me. He could hear Marcus breathing. Come Sunday, his son said. Make coffee, Daniel said. He didn't know what Sunday would bring. He didn't know what Brianna would do when Marcus had that conversation with her. Didn't know whether she was calculating or frightened or simply a young woman who had made a terrible decision trying to secure her future and hadn't understood what she was reaching past to get it. He didn't know if the house would stay his in any meaningful sense. He didn't know if the marriage would go forward or what version of his son would show up on Sunday or whether the oak tree would outlast all of them. What he knew was this. He was 61 years old and he had raised a son in this house. And the raising had been real, and no document could touch what was real. He'd spent his whole career watching people try to put the things that mattered into writing, love and trust and loyalty, inheritance and obligation, the agreements families make without ever meaning to. He knew better than anyone that paper was just paper. The real thing lived somewhere else. He went outside in the late afternoon and got his pruning shears from the garage. He started trimming the rows of Sharon bush by the front steps. It took him 40 minutes. When he was done, he stood back and looked at it, and it looked right, the way things do when you've tended them long enough. He went back inside. He had a dinner to make. Sunday was coming.